Hello, everyone, and welcome to our fourth episode of Careers in Changemaking. Careers in Changemaking is brought to you by European Activism Incubator. This is a live interview series that focuses on showcasing careers and jobs in the impact sector. It can be NGOs, nonprofits, charities, social entrepreneurship, and also more creative sectors that we're going to be talking about today. So I'm Laura. I work as a communication and fundraising assistant, and today I'm really happy to welcome Emily Stoker, who's a freelance impact filmmaker. Hi, Emily.
Hi, Laura.
Emily is based in London, and she works in freelance, so she also will be talking about this a bit. How are you, Emily?
I'm good, thank you. I am locked down in London, like you said, but I'm well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. Actually, France is about to go in lockdown in 2 days, so profiting as much as we can before. All right, so I'm thinking that maybe some of the people who are watching us are wondering, what is impact filmmaking?
Yeah, absolutely. So impact filmmaking, I think, is quite a wide umbrella. So it could describe a lot of things. There are films that people call impact films, which are often kind of showing the impact of perhaps a community project or some other type of project. But then I suppose impact filmmaking could also describe films like fundraising films, which often have that aspect of kind of showing the impact that something has had in order to raise money. Or it could be a documentary that's showing the impact that something's having on wider society or the environment, for example. So it's quite a broad term in terms of what I do with impact filmmaking. It's sort of what I described. It's films that normally are showing the impact of some kind of project, or maybe even a negative, like what is a problem, what's the impact that's having on society, but hopefully what can we do to change that?
All right. So one might say that you've had quite an atypical career path. So you actually didn't study filmmaking, did you? And so you went from studying something different and little by little building your career and then taking a shift towards filmmaking. So could you tell us a bit more about what you studied? What was your thought process when you thought, okay, I'm going to start, going freelance, and how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's true. I didn't study filmmaking. I studied languages. I studied French and Italian here in the UK. And at that time, I was really interested in digital marketing. Actually, there was a bit of a crisis kind of working out what I wanted to do, but then I thought it was going to be digital marketing. So I got some internships doing that. And then when I left university, I sort of getting ahead of myself a bit, because I'm sure we'll chat about this more, but I moved abroad. I moved to Italy, to the same place that I'd done my study abroad placement. And I decided that I would try to build a freelance career in social media management, digital marketing sort of area. And I actually managed to get a decent freelance gig within my first few months out there. Wow. But then I had also been doing YouTube on the side, just as a hobby. And I really enjoyed making videos. And I saw that video had a lot of potential in terms of digital marketing. It was something that we're going back to sort of 2015, 2016, when video was like still on this huge upward trajectory, which it still is, but we see the effects much more now. So I wanted to get in there a little bit sooner and pivot my services to really focus on video. So I already had taught myself some of the skills to make videos, but there was definitely a process.
Where I may ask, how did you taught yourself the skills?
Just from making YouTube videos. If we go way back, I when I was 16, I was using my webcam and I think Windows Movie Maker, some kind of free software to edit and make makeup videos, actually. But then I started making videos about my year abroad when I was sort of 20, 21. And then that started a bit more of a serious sort of passion about video. And it was really just through trying things that I learned and watching tutorials on YouTube that I taught myself. YouTube and the internet is a great resource, which obviously sort of is new in the last decade or so, but I think it's a great tool for young people to teach themselves new skills.
And so then in digital marketing, you've worked for some pretty big companies. You've worked for Gap. You've worked for some others in the fashion industry.
So this was all through an agency that I was freelancing with at the time. I had sort of my main clients, but then there were some pretty big names that the agency was working with too that I would kind of dip into some of those projects. So there was Gas Jeans, Bulgari, hotels. Yeah, those were some of the big names that are probably recognizable. And I learned a lot when I was there about social media and how it can be leveraged for brands, sort of on a very big scale.
Mm-hmm. And have you used social media to like get started and also promote your work and your freelancing? Can you say a freelance company? Like what would be the term?
Yeah, so I changed the way I describe what I do depending on who I'm talking to, because there's not really a set phrase, I suppose. But yeah, I call myself a freelancer. I talk about my filmmaking company because it officially is a company, even though sometimes it is just me. Sometimes I will bring in other freelancers, but not employees, other freelancers. But yeah, freelance business is the way that I refer to it sometimes too. Yeah, sorry, what was the question you were?
How you used social platforms to promote yourself and share your portfolio, some things like this.
Yeah, so from very early on, I knew that I wanted to use the skills that I picked up with social media. At that time, video wasn't as much on my radar, if we're going right back to when I first moved to Italy to start as a social media manager. But actually, I was using video already. I was showing them my YouTube videos that I'd made. When I say them, I mean, for example, when I was applying to this agency that I ended up working with. I also, just on a very kind of zooming into specific examples, when I applied to work with that agency, I actually made a designated Facebook page that acted like a timeline of my story and the internships I'd done. I sort of created different posts that told the story of this internship that I did on my year abroad, or why I make YouTube videos and how I love doing that. So, that's a very specific example, but I think kind of on the grander scale as well, I knew that I needed to leverage any experience that I'd had and any opportunities I created for myself through my own projects to show potential clients what I was capable of doing, because I hadn't studied social marketing or video production if we're getting further down the line. Yeah. But just, again, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but much more recently, I think that in particular my YouTube videos that I made, and so I went back to YouTube when I was a couple of years into freelancing, just to show off what I was capable of. I think that's also helped me to secure some of the jobs, the more recent jobs that I've got that are sort of more in line of what I want to work towards in the future. So it's really helped me with my progression in these, particularly in these early years, I think. Yeah.
And would you say that social networks have this capability of kind of creating a link between prospect clients or even people who like your work, by being a bit more intimate, by ways of storytelling, or also that sometimes some personal posts can come in the feeds?
Yeah, I think particularly because I in my experience, YouTube was one of the big platforms that I was using as I was focusing more and more on video. I also shared some quite personal stories on my YouTube channel, just in terms of I was the face of the channel. I was sharing vlog style videos a lot of the time. And I think that helped to create a sort of connection with prospect clients, because I actually did have prospect clients reaching out to me through my YouTube videos at the beginning. A lot of it was through referrals, but some of it was directly as a result of my social media work. And as I said, even if it wasn't, I think just seeing that I had that there and being able to kind of see my face, see my personality a bit, I think that when I was starting out in particular, I was working with smaller businesses who really wanted to feel that personal connection. So I think that did really help.
Okay. And now a bit more about freelance, about going freelance. Is it tricky? Is it difficult? How was it for you?
Yeah, so I started thinking about freelancing when I was in my last year of university. I toyed with the idea before, but I really seriously started to try to plan things out. And looking back now, I didn't know what I was sort of in store for.
Yeah, you were young, right? How old were you? 18 or?
No, I was 22 by this point.
Okay, still
yeah,
young.
I think that's right, 22. But yeah, still young. And I think just I was proud of the work that I built up through my internships. But looking back now, I think, I suppose you never feel ready. And I feel like the older you get, the more perspective you have on some of the decisions that you made. I don't know if I'd be brave enough to do it now, to be honest, but because I started freelancing at 22 and I am still going now 5 years later, I think that the element of risk feels, at least in that specific circumstance, feels a little bit less scary. Like if I was going to go freelance now after 5 years of a full-time job directly going into the industry, there would be different pros from that for sure. Like that's probably a more sensible approach, but I think it would feel a lot more risky because I would have got used to the security of having a paycheck every month. So is it risky? Yes. I tried to prepare myself, probably not as much as I could have done in hindsight, but particularly in the first year, things started to take off for me pretty well when I got involved with that agency, and that was, I think, as stable as I could have hoped to have been at the first step of my freelance career, at least.
And so did this agency recruit you? How did you establish contact?
So like I said, I moved to a place in Italy. I'd grown up all my life in the UK, but moved to Italy upon graduating. And it was the same place that I'd done 6 months of Erasmus. So I had friends in the area. I talked to them about what I wanted to do, and they told me the names of a couple of agencies I should look out for opportunities with. And I saw that this agency in particular was looking for an intern when I first arrived, and I actually applied for an internship. Never heard back from them about that, but about 3 or 4 months later, they said they were recruiting a freelance social media manager, which was sort of more than I'd hoped for and exactly what I wanted to do. So a lot of that, I have to say, was being in the right place at the right time. But I had obviously tried to make the contact. I was trying to do things to, be the person in the right place at the right time. But I think it also, I just want to mention, I was teaching English in my not my spare time. My sort of main thing before I got that job was teaching English, and that is sort of the reality of chasing the dream, was that I needed to have something in the background to bring some money in the meantime. Yeah.
All right. And so what are you up to now? So there are perks with freelancing. You are being your own boss, you can decide what projects you're taking on and all this. So I've heard that you've done some things for British TV. Is that right?
Yeah. So as I said, I had that pivot from digital marketing into video production. At first it was video marketing, and then more and more I felt more comfortable saying, actually, I am just a video producer, filmmaker now. And particularly in the last 12 months, I've been working on some bigger projects with some of the big TV channels, or rather pieces that were commissioned by big TV channels and will be shown on big TV channels in the UK. So my first sort of step into that was last summer when I worked as a shooting assistant producer on A Place in the Sun, which if you've spent any time in the UK, you may well have heard of it. It plays on Channel 4. It's been playing on Channel 4 for the last sort of 20 years. So just if you don't know it, basically it's sort of house hunting abroad for a British audience. So I went out to France and Italy, and as shooting assistant producer, I was helping with the organization of those shoots, but I was also filming parts of it and wearing a lot of hats throughout production of a couple of episodes for that show. And then in October of last year, I was out in Italy shooting an episode of a documentary series for Channel 5 about a river in northern Italy, which was a lot of fun and more in line with the documentary aspirations that I have as well as a documentary series.
Yeah, so in the end now, through those two examples that you've just given, your background in foreign language, it comes in handy, right? You know, because you speak Italian, you speak French, and you speak English.
Yeah, absolutely. Sort of aside from my work, I love languages. I still love using my languages, and that's something that I've learned is good to use as sort of my unique selling point in projects, particularly with TV. I wouldn't have got, I wouldn't have got my foot in the door with A Place in the Sun if I didn't speak French, and I wouldn't have got the documentary if I didn't speak Italian. Yeah.
All right, that's nice for you know, if people are watching us, like foreign languages are important, so put the necessary work in them. So I had a question that was more about the filmmaking industry. Would you say that it's a male-dominated industry, or actually is it pretty gender varied? Have you felt that it's changing?
Yeah, so I think it depends what area of filmmaking you're in, because there's a lot of sort of different, even within the filmmaking industry, there are a lot of different ways you can approach it. Even in my own career, the TV stuff feels quite separate from my sort of video production freelance business company. Like we were saying, I refer to it as different things, where I'm working more with non-profits type clients. So from what I've seen so far in TV, there do seem to be quite a lot of men working as sort of shooting producer directors on the field. Perhaps not so much in the office, perhaps the office-based roles, there are more women. But in the sort of non-profit side things of what I do, again, there, I think it really depends. There are a lot of young guys in the industry, particularly guys who are really into the tech and really love that side of it. I feel like that's something I see a lot of, even just on YouTube when I'm searching for tutorials, learning something new. But actually, when you get into certain pockets of filmmaking, like the non-profit stuff, I do see more women. Like, I'm still fairly new to the industry, but there are definitely lots of us out there. But I don't have the exact stats on what the balance is like. I would suspect it's still a little bit more leaning towards being a male-dominated industry.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk also about your personal projects, because as I was just saying earlier, as a freelancer, you also have time to you can dedicate time to projects of your own. So could you tell us a bit more about this and what you're working on?
Yeah, sure. So sort of balancing the TV stuff with the non-profit stuff is one side, but particularly when I was first wanting to work with different non-profits, I wanted to be able to have sort of some work that I could show to them, that sort of portfolio pieces that wouldn't exist unless I put my own work in. Okay. So more recently, this has been more documentary style things, because I do want to move more into making both digital and broadcast documentary pieces. So at the moment, I've started work on a new short documentary, which is sort of looking at the effect of, or perhaps not the effect of, but what the reality is for young people in the world of work. So specifically, I'm conducting phone calls with people in their 20s around the UK and asking them sort of where they're at the moment in their career, and what it's felt like being a young person in your 20s in the 2020s. Now, obviously, the pandemic has a huge impact on that. There's a recession, a lot of people are losing their jobs. But just in general, I think it's an interesting age to sort of reflect on. And yeah, like I said, I want to kind of say something wider about society here in the UK, the point that we're at right now, but also document this little snapshot in time with what's going on with the pandemic, recession, also all the things that are accumulating into this specific moment in time.
All right. And so you said that documentary would be the type of filmmaking that you're most interested in. What type of documentaries, if I may ask?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and I still ask myself that quite often. But I would definitely like to be making more. I suppose I want to be making projects that have perhaps a bigger audience or a bigger impact, I guess we could say. It's not so much about audience. So, I mean, one way to do that is to have a big audience through making broadcast TV documentaries, for example. I really want to be doing more of that. But also the independent pieces, like the documentary I'm doing at the moment, because it depends what funders you have and who's putting money into the piece. But I want to have a little bit more freedom to say exactly what I want to say with my creative vision and not have too many people above me influencing what the final piece looks like. There's always going to be some level of that. So I think it's a balance between broadcast and independent films. And I still love doing the digital things. So it's I've got a varied vision of what I'd like to do in the future, to be honest.
So even right now you're open to, working, like doing a variety of things. Do you think it's an asset in filmmaking?
I think particularly, I'm just thinking for any young people coming into filmmaking now, I sometimes speak to freelancers who I'm thinking of getting to help me on a project, and I'll say, oh, do you have this skill? For example, animation. Like sometimes I do a bit of animation, motion graphics on my pieces, and they'll say, oh no, that would be the job for an animator, someone who's studied that. And I'm like, okay, well, that's a fair answer. But at the same time, I think that the variety of skills that I do bring to the table have helped me to get a lot of the opportunities that I have. So a lot of my clients do like the fact that I can do animation and film in a documentary style that I've taught myself to the level where I can film things for TV. So I think there's a lot of value in having a variety of skills, as you said. But on the flip side, sometimes when I am applying for some of the more traditional jobs in TV, I think there are still people who have been in the industry for longer who don't quite understand the value of having those transferable skills, or they really need to see it in person to get it. And particularly at this time, that's obviously difficult to do. Yeah. So I think there's still, there's sort of the more traditional route, which I won't discount, but that's not been my experience. So I value my variety in sort of the skills that I've taught myself and the experiences that I've had.
All right. So if you were to think of career advice for people who are who want to start in filmmaking, also for people who are interested in, going freelance, and in general, young job seekers. We have a question, so maybe I'll just I will handle the question first. So Paulina says, it is really amazing that you've acquired all these skills via self-learning. How much time did it take it? That's a really good question.
Well, I suppose it's taken all the time in my life up until now, arguably. I know that sounds a little bit cheesy and pedantic, but I mean, I'm still learning. So I guess to kind of give a more actionable answer, I got my first DSLR camera, so my first sort of proper camera that I could really start to shoot manually and things, when I was 19 or 20. So that's sort of 8 years ago now. But like I said, before then I was filming sort of less serious videos in my own time, and that definitely helped. But I think if, perhaps let's imagine I'm talking to a 19-year-old who has never picked up a DSLR camera. They've maybe filmed some things on their phone, but they want to teach themselves. With the resources on YouTube, I think that it's very possible to do it, to teach yourself to a standard where you could be taking on clients in a couple of years. Just depends how serious you are and how much time you put into it. You need to be self-critical of your own work, and maybe getting some friends who are interested in similar things to also give you feedback on your work is great, because it's the technical skills, but it's also the skills of learning how to tell a story and how, I mean, sometimes I get clients just sending me footage to edit, and even there I've sort of worked out how I can build a story from that. So that's another side of the skill set, I think, that is sometimes neglected by people who want to step a foot in the industry. And that's a skill that I think is perhaps undervalued by people who don't know as much about it yet.
Yeah, knowing how to convey emotion. So Rachel asked, how much creative freedom do you get in video making, and does it depend on the sector you are making for?
Yeah, it definitely depends. So I always try with my client work that's not involving television, when I'm sort of the boss within the realm of what I'm doing, the client is still paying me for a certain outcome. So there needs to be an important conversation at the beginning of any project about what the client's goals are. Because if they don't have much experience of the sector, they might say, you know best, we'll give you creative freedom. But within that, I can't make whatever I want. I need to understand why they're paying me. Are they trying to raise money for a particular fundraising campaign? Or are they trying to get the attention of a certain demographic of people? So I always ask, how are you going to distribute the video? The things that maybe some filmmakers don't kind of go as much into. I think good filmmakers to some extent will, but maybe I sort of bypass that boundary a little bit because I need to understand how much where I'm going to direct that creative freedom. So yeah, it depends on the sector. It depends on the outcome that the client wants, and that's also going to impact the style, sort of what the brand that I'm working with is. So I hope that answers that question.
And I almost forgot. So we have here in the studio some content that you've made. So would you like to tell us about it and then share it?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I was saying just now, one of the important things is understanding who the client is actually trying to target with the video that you're making. So what I'm going to show is a snippet from a video that I was commissioned to make by a private fundraiser who was working to raise money for a community centre and / church in England. And what they wanted was a video asset to send off with their fundraising applications to show potential people potentially putting money into this project, what they were actually putting money towards. And a great way to do that is to source stories from the community to really show where the money is going to be going and why it's important. So the final video that we settled on and decided to make was a 2.5-minute video that picked up some of these stories from the community and the projects that the community centre was doing. But I'm just going to show you a minute. I think it's a minute.
It was a lifeline for me because my husband died and I was amazed how friendly people were.
Yeah, I had a stroke just about 18 months ago and I was in hospital 2.5 months. They've got me back. We've dragged her to it.
So often when I'm just around God Manchester and I bump into people and I'll say, oh yeah, I'm part of God Manchester Baptist Church. And they'll say, oh, I went to Littlefoot there, or oh yeah, I know some people who were really helped out by the food bank.
Not that long ago, a lady came to us after having decided not to throw herself off the bridge between God Manchester and Huntingdon, but to come to the food bank.
Yeah, that's really poignant.
Thank you. Yeah, so as well, so what you saw there was the coffee morning that they ran for the elderly to kind of combat loneliness and give them a sense of community. And you also saw the food bank, which of course offers food to those who might be struggling. But I think, like I was saying, building a story is so important, and sourcing those stories was, it was a case of me going to the place and not having that much time to form a relationship with members of the community, work out who had stories that would do well on camera, and then get them to sit in front of a camera and talk with some conviction and emotion on the topic. And that's what I talk about when I say that's a skill that's really important. And it's also the part I really enjoy. I love chatting to people and learning about their lives and their stories.
So I have 2 more questions. So the one was about if you have any advice that you'd give to young job seekers, people who want to get started in filmmaking, or also just people who want to start in freelance. What would you tell them?
Yeah, it's a big topic, and I was thinking about this before our interview, and I think I wouldn't necessarily advise people to take the route that I've taken. I think it's just as legitimate and perhaps more sensible to go straight into the industry and work in a normal job working your way up. If you know what you want to do, then why not? You're going to make more contacts. You're going to learn from people who know more than you. But if you're anything like me, then you will be stubborn and probably still want to do things freelance. But I think whichever route you decide to take, I think it's important to try and go in with an innovative mindset and think about how you can set yourself apart from others and go that extra mile and consider the bigger picture of what you're doing, whether you're a runner starting from sort of the bottom on a set in a production, or whether you are just going to try and find clients. I think look at the bigger picture, understand what people need you to do, what role you're playing, what role the project's playing, and try to make yourself valuable, even if it is employing skills that you wouldn't necessarily immediately associate with the job that you're doing. And hopefully that's something young people can sort of take that advice into whatever they want to go into.
Okay, yeah, very valuable piece of advice. And my last question, a little bit of a bonus question: is there a documentary or movie you've seen recently, or not recently, and that you really like and you would recommend to people?
Good question. I'm trying to think if I haven't, in the last couple of weeks, I haven't watched any new documentaries. So I'm going to cheat a little bit because this isn't my field, but it's a podcast documentary that I've been listening to. I've listened to several, so now I'm trying to think of which one. I think, okay, Serial. Maybe a lot of people have heard of it, but I think season 3 of that podcast in particular, it goes every week and it does a deep dive on the US judicial system. But what I like about it and what I think fits in well with filmmaking is using the format that you have, whether that's audio, whether that's visual, to really connect people to a story, make them feel an emotional connection to it, and understand the wider societal implications of what's going on. I think that's why media, whether it's audio visual, or even visual, can be so powerful in doing that. It's make us feel connected to a theme and hopefully make us want to do something to make the world a better place at the end of it.
All right. Well, thank you, Emily, for agreeing to this interview. It was really a pleasure talking to you. And,
thank you so much. Me too.
And yeah, and I wish you a nice Easter weekend, or just simply a weekend if you're not celebrating Easter.
Thank you.
All right.
You too, Laura. It's been a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye.